Bridge Nation? It's Bruce Sports here. We're back with another video of top 10 fantasy basketball players leading up into the 2022 Fantasy League. This is a list that we made ourselves. It is similar to most top 10s out there, but it is a little bit different. And we're going to talk about why they are that way. Enjoy. Well, moving on to the fantasy meme of the season. I think this is for the season, not the week. We got Nikola Jokic, and he's been on my fantasy team for the past 2 years. And 2 years ago, he was like 10th overall pick, and now last season was first overall, and we really think he's going to go first overall again. He's a machine. Period. Moving on. We got top 10, starting off with Nikola Jokic, none other than that. He is a monstrous 58.91 average on an average fantasy night where he plays. This is quite different, quite ways away from other players. One thing that makes him so valuable that there's a multiplier of rebounds, and he has a lot of rebound average, like almost 14 rebounds a game. That's one highlight I want to draw off here. Like 27 points too. That's just him stepping on the court. His first 15 minutes, first 15 minutes, he's 10-10, something like that. And then he chills. Number 2, we have Giannis Antetokounmpo. He averaged 56.7 fantasy points over the last season. I think Giannis is not going to age in terms of fantasy value for a couple more seasons to come because he plays on a team where he mostly carries the stats and the success on him. He has support, no hate to some of the players there, but he is the core right now, and the plays will be run through him no matter what, and he will reflect that performance to your fantasy.
Yeah, I actually had Giannis ranked number 1. The other two had him right here. I think he has a little bit of a revenge season and just goes off. Yeah, puts up even more crazy stats.
Keep in mind, going off Alex points, the top 3 we're going to talk about. I'm just going to move on to the next top 3. Got Luka Doncic. You can argue until the sun comes up. These guys are tied for fantasy value. You put them on a team as your number 1 guy, you're not going to upset. We're just talking about the margins here.
Yeah, can't go wrong.
Talk about Luka Doncic. He is, again, average 60.2 fantasy points a night. And then one more thing to highlight for him, that he is proven himself to be really injury prone. So if you have the opportunities to have a top 4 pick in your draft, maybe go for Giannis or Jokic because they seem to be more resilient in terms of durability. Luka, he's not like Mr. Glass. He's still a very tough guy, but just be better.
Yeah, he has some issues. I will say too with Luka, and the reason I've had him behind Jokic and Giannis personally is the other 2 guys can play the center position. And for fantasy basketball, how they've kind of advocated throughout, the history of our channel, it's probably the hardest position to find good value at. So when you can get a guy like Jokic or Giannis who both can play center and his fantasy leagues right at the start of the draft, that already fills a major need for your team, and it's going to make the rest of your fantasy draft a lot easier to have that position already secured. All right. But yeah, we'll move on to our number 4 players. So in our kind of combined list here, somehow Jayson Tatum ended up being number 4. I feel like this is a little bit higher than where a couple of us had him, but just kind of the way things worked out, this is where he came in. But I think this is about the right range for Jayson Tatum. So if you look at his stats there, average 6 points, rebounds, assists. He's a decent defensive player as well, and the numbers are there on the screen for you to look at here. His average fantasy points are definitely noticeably lower than the top 3 guys that we had before there. But going kind of with that, I think he's going to be a hungry player coming off the loss of the Warriors in that championship run. He's a young guy. He's healthy. He played over 70 games last year. He stays on the court, and that's something should be looking for when you're going for that first round pick.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then also another thing to kind of add, like I know some people might, be more prone to risk in their first round. I personally am not. I want someone that's going to play as many games as they can, and outside of the top 3, it's all really close in terms of fantasy points per night, except for maybe Embiid, but he'll come up in a little bit.
Yeah. Probably one of your top priorities in the first round. If you draft a guy who's injured in a deeper league in the first round, just your season's done. Like, it's just simple as that.
For sure.
But yeah, we'll move on to number 5. So this is who I would have had. I had a Jayson Tatum personally, but Joel Embiid, he had a monster average for fantasy points last season. He's up there with those top 3 guys. I think we mostly kind of had him just a little bit lower than those top 3 because he has had a history of some injuries, missing a couple of games here and there. But there's no arguing that when this guy is on the court, he puts up stats with the best players in the league, and if he stays healthy, he could compete for that top fantasy spot.
For sure.
All right. So next we have an interesting player. So I think there's a lot left to be seen with Kevin Durant this offseason. There's been a lot of articles coming out this week about Kevin Durant. Most recently, at the time of recording, we've heard that Kevin Durant had a meeting with the Nets owner, and he kind of told the Nets owner, like, hey, if you want to keep me on the team, fire the GM and fire Steve Nash because I'm not happy with the direction that this team's moving in. So kind of gave him that ultimatum there. So if Durant stays on the Nets, I think we can see similar stats to what we saw this year. If he moves to another team, the stats kind of could be a wide range depending on the situation that he's put in. So as we move closer to the start of the season, we should have a little bit more clarity on that. But nonetheless, I think a question around Durant at his age is going to be his health, how many games he's going to be playing in the court this season. Because of those factors, I think this is he's kind of sitting in the middle of the list right now for us.
Yeah, another thing to add maybe is just that these rankings are, I guess, conditional on the players being healthy. Any one of these players suffers an injury, they're probably not in this list anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah, you never know when a freak accident can happen. It's part of fantasy sports that for those people who played it for a couple of years, we all know what happens.
Part of the fun, injuries during playoff season can't be avoided.
All right, so number 7, we got James Harden. So I think I'd say, compared to a lot of lists you might see out there, I think collectively we're a little bit higher on James Harden than a lot of people for fantasy basketball are. And last season, I think most people would consider it kind of a down year for Harden from what we've seen in prior years. But with that, those stats he still put up are averaging about 48 fantasy points a game. So we're considering that a down year. If he comes back to the season healthy, I know he was kind of playing through some injuries last year, and he's able to stay on the court. Harden's he'd been at the top of the fantasy list for a couple of years back in the day, and he can sneak up there again with the right health and the right role this season.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe he puts on the weight, comes back, drops 40 points, gets the no-look block, He's had some filthy plays.
He has. He's probably got some of the filthiest plays.
Yeah. Alright, so moving on, I think, is this our number 7 or number 8 pick?
So this is number 7, so he's tied with James Harden.
Oh, I see, okay. So we've got Trae Young. I think he finished actually a little bit higher than this in the previous season. I think he was 5th, maybe? 4th. He was a lot higher than I expected him to be, averaging the 46.39 fantasy points there. And as you can kind of see, he just put up monster numbers, 28.4 points, close to 10 assists. Turnovers weren't too high given how much time he spends, with the ball. Almost a steal per game. I think we have him a little bit lower this season because of the trade that went down that sent DeJounte Murray to the Hawks. And I think the points fall a little bit and potentially the assists go up. Or maybe I could see the assists dropping too, just depending on who has the ball more. or kind of what goes on.
Full correction. Yeah. Trae Young was ranked 3rd.
He's ranked 3rd. Okay, yeah, this is quite high.
I'm kind of shook and having a hard time to believe that. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, Trae was healthy last year. I'm kind of building on what Alex said too. DeJounte Murray himself was a top 10 fantasy guy last year, like kind of when it was all said and done. So when you put 2 top 10 fantasy guys on the same team, there's only so many stats to go around. Like one of them's number.
Just to reinforce a point that we were making last season, drop a comment if you have heard of DeJounte Murray. So just let us know. Let us know.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. So our number 9, 9th ranked player here, Steph Curry, and he did go off in the current season. I think he finished a little bit higher than 9, but he did have to carry the Warriors due to the absence of Klay Thompson there for a little bit. So he was, I think he'll still be the number 1 option, but I think the ball just went to him quite a bit, and you see that kind of reflected in his stats with the 25.5 points. 6 assists, low turnovers, and some decent defensive numbers here. I don't see him slowing down too much. I've looked at his seasons after winning a championship, and he remains fairly consistent. The numbers almost go up. So I think this is about right. Just given, I guess, a little bit of risk with Curry, like taking him first. Number 9 seems about right. So now we'll go through some of our. So now we'll go through some of our honorable mentions here. So for anyone that's a fan of the Hornets, so for all like 3 of you out there, we have LaMelo here. So I know we've heard some crazy things about LaMelo. And honestly, like for the like I do see it. I'm not like I don't think it's impossible that LaMelo finishes, for example, top 10. Like he could easily make that list. I think it's more, who do I have more faith in as a number 1 pick for fantasy? And he falls just outside that top 10. And I think he is also going to fall to a lot of people, depending on who's in your league. Other names: Paul George, Anthony Davis, Karl Anthony Towns. I actually had Karl Anthony Towns in my top 10, and I think he makes it again this year. I think the introducing Gobert to the team just kind of gives him more favorable matchups and maybe gets his assists up. And I think the defensive numbers stay the same.
I'd like to hear what Batu has to say about LaMelo Ball. I think Batu had LaMelo Ball ranked number 6 on his list individually.
Number 6, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a high. I wanna believe in players, like young players who've been in the league, who got beaten around the league.
With your number 1 pick, you want to believe in these players?
Listen, he's been around the league. He's obviously a talented player. I was not a fan of him when he first entered the league, and I was proven otherwise. I was wrong, and he is good. And if you want to take a chance, like if you're a risk taker, like Alex said, I am not. But if it comes down to like after the top 6, he is not the worst because he produces a lot of stuff. He's a main he's one of the main options in that team, if not the main option.
Yeah, he's the number 1 option, and he's fun to watch.
So like, I think it's to be like, in my opinion, it is a better pick than AD because AD is old, LaMelo's young. He has lots to prove at this point, so that's why he's gonna go off. It's like similar idea of us ranking Jayson Tatum so high. He is been in the league long enough that he is like part of the league now. He's one of the main guys, and I think LaMelo is like 2 years off of that. And I think this year is when he needs to really show himself, and I think that's going to reflect in fantasy. So, if not a first round pick, and then I'm not going to like argue too much that why he's not a top 10, but he's a very valuable second round pick, like at the very least.
He's in the range. I think, yeah, for me, he's just not proven yet. So we'll see what he does this season. If you want to take a bold pick, keep LaMelo in mind. I want to talk about Anthony Davis a little bit here, though, because he was one guy I had lower on my list around, I think 9 or 10. But compared to the other guys who didn't have them on the list. So I know Anthony Davis last season, he was pretty injury prone, missed a lot of games, and that's kind of been the story with like my team I root for is the Pelicans, and so I've seen Anthony Davis miss a lot of games over his career. But with that being said, last season alone, I think you can ask Lakers fans. I think generally the consensus is we were pretty disappointed with what we saw from Anthony Davis. I think a lot of people expect and know that he can play better than this. So I think those fantasy point averages could be jumping up. I think he can be hungry after missing the playoffs next year. And if the health goes in his direction, I think Anthony Davis can be an easy top 10 fantasy player.
Yeah, well, he's supposed to be the man out in LA, right? He needs to step up, and this is potentially the year where he takes over the team, takes it from LeBron. So, number 10, we have Ja Morant, and he had a really solid regular season despite some injuries, but I think what most people remember about him is what he did in the playoffs. And he did have his nights where, he wasn't the greatest, but he also had some really crazy games where he was scoring every possession, put the Grizzlies on his back for a little bit there. And I think if that's the player that kind of comes into the regular season, starting it off, I could see him around this range.
Yeah, if he's healthy, I think he has a really good chance of finishing top 10. He's one of those young stars of the league who's just going to keep climbing up. I'm actually curious to see where his fellow draft classmate Zion Williamson is going to end up on the list when it's all said and done too. If he's healthy, he could be a sneaky top 15 player here as well.
Yeah, he could be a player that falls to you in the 20s and has some decent upside.
Absolutely.
I also think a name that we overlooked might have been Dame Lillard. I think he has a good shot at cracking the top 10 too. I would have had him at like 11, and I feel kind of bad because Dame for the last however many years has been just a top 10 guy.
I agree. Damian Lillard was right there on the edge of my list, but it's hard. It's like when you're are you putting Damian Lillard above Ja Morant? I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess range. I feel like Damian Lillard's going to produce similar value, but it comes down to who you think's going to be healthier, and I'm going with a younger player on that one.
Yeah, or just how much risk you're willing to take with that number 1 pick, because especially if you're in a deep league where your number 1 pick can potentially win you certain matchups. It matters a little bit.
For sure. But yeah, I think at that point we're good to call our top 10 list. So if you like, guys, comment down below. Who did we miss in the top 10 that you think should have been up there? I know we got some Tyrese Halliburton fans out there who probably have him up in the top 10. But
top 3.
Top 3. Nah, so number one.
Number 1, Tyrese Halliburton.
Go for it.
But yeah, no, thanks for watching the video, guys. Yeah, we'll see you in the next one.